we might have a little bit of a nicer backdrop, but a morning show for America would be Candace and Tim in the morning. We lead with the person she's just done a little better, let's be honest, in follower counts and exposure. And I will tag right along. And I mean, first of all, thank you for doing this.
Candace and Tim.
Candace, for sure.
It was like Regis and Kelly.
I play my position. I know the deal.
Just making sure.
Candace and Tim. I fully play my position. I show up, you hand me an index card, I'm good.
That's good.
I go for sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. Great.
I wanted to tell you a fun story that I think you'll like. I know that you probably you know your reach, but I think it surprises you sometimes. I was at the Beverly Hills Hotel. A French guy who checks me in all the time goes, "Get over here." I thought there was like a problem in the hotel. I didn't know what was going on. I thought there was a leak in the room. He goes, listen, he's whispering in the lobby of the hotel. He goes, "Are you watching the Candace Owens expose right now?" And I said, yeah, I kind of a little bit. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, I'm from France. And he goes, I believe it's true. And he's like, I know people who've seen weird stuff. And we just started giggling like schoolgirls and talking, watching Candace Owens, because you've now become like this wild investigative, like you do these deep dives into stuff. And it's really wild. And like, it was just really fun to me that, this guy who's just checking me into a hotel was really like watching your content, and then he's on this thing's blown up in France.
Oh,
and
everywhere. I mean, it is the most international thing I've ever done, and I could not have ever predicted that it would be that big.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is if Emmanuel Macron had not sent me that letter threat, we were only going to do one episode.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's like I was so angry that he had the audacity to send a server processor to Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm a little testy when I'm pregnant. I'll give you that, but someone is gonna knock on my front door and say the president of France says you're not allowed to speak or else. So yeah, it's just a challenge. So I was like, okay, like now we're really doing this thing. Like I already knew he married a dude,
right?
But now we're really doing this thing, and we just poured hours and hours and hours into just more research, tagging it on, making sure people could follow it themselves and understand like this wasn't like for funsies. It's like he actually married a dude.
What was interesting about this thing, I mean, you go on this, I mean, I don't want to call it a treasure hunt, but you go on this really exhaustive trip, this research into Brigitte Macron, who, by the way, a lot of people in France agree with you.
Oh, they know.
Of all political stripes. And by the way, gay people, trans, like this is not like a lot of people are like, one of the journalists who looked into this was a gay journalist. Like, a lot of people are like, yeah, something's up here. Something's up.
Oh, it's more than up. It is like 1,000% true. Or else the way that he could have stopped the entire docuseries, for those people who haven't watched it, we then wrote back to the president and his mister at the Élysée Palace and said, I'm glad you opened up lines of communication. We're not interested. We're not in the business of defaming anyone.
Right.
I would make a fool of myself.
Right.
So if you would just kindly answer this yes or no question, like, were you born a woman, a female, Brigitte? We'll include this and we'll stop the series. They declined to do it.
Right.
So who would not stop if I'm like, I'm about to do this huge piece and you can stop it by simply answering yes or no, but they couldn't do that because then they would have been lying on record. It would have opened up way more issues. And unfortunately, he's not familiar with law in America, but in order to reach that actual malice standard, you have to show that we acted in reckless disregard for the truth. You refuse to say the truth. I mean, it was just this pompous 100-page, we don't have to answer whether or not Brigitte is a woman or a man. What a bizarre thing to say.
It's such an odd story because what's very interesting about the story to me, there's many layers to it. And what it really calls into question is, how much do we know about the people who run our lives?
Nothing.
So this is what's really interesting to me. These people are introduced at some point as the best option to lead whatever. I think one of the reasons Trump was so popular is that people knew him for 30 years. Love him, hate him. Multiple wives, this, that, and the other. You know, people say nasty things about him. People adore him, but they know him. He's not, you know, certain people, Bill Clinton is governing the smallest state in America and is then thrust into the spotlight. Barack Obama, a lot of people on the right wing just emerge and they become, you know, a household name immediately. We don't know. No one is doing a lot of research into the backstories of any of these people.
Right.
And when we do, we're attacked. You're being attacked. It's like it's the craziest. I'm like, what is happening?
And it's so much crazier because there's stuff that I can't say on record just yet.
Of course.
I'll tell you off camera, but it's gotten even crazier in terms of like Emmanuel has really come undone because he has never been this exposed. Everyone kind of already knew in France because in France it was being like it was a bubble, but the journalists again on the left were the ones that fell down the hole as they were trying to write these honestly, they were trying to prop up Brigitte. They were trying to write these feminist pieces about Brigitte, and then suddenly, they're like, oh, they were trying to do like the Michelle Obama, oh, this is amazing for women. And then when they tried to do any bit of research, they fell down a hole because the person didn't exist. And then suddenly they were being called into the Elysee Palace. Like, imagine I'm going to write this glowing piece about Ivanka Trump and her childhood.
Right.
And suddenly you get called in and you have Secret Service being like, what are you working on?
Right. And there's no photos.
You can't do, here's what you're going to write. And let me tell you how it's going to go. And people were going, this is weird. Why can't I find or confirm anything? Why are they locking down yearbooks? Imagine if you were like, I'm going to write about Candace. I'm like, I'm going to Stanford High School. And then suddenly like Stanford High School starts locking down yearbooks. Something's not right here. This is not, it should be very easy to fact check that somebody existed.
It's very easy to find at least a few
cheerleading
photos
maybe
of somebody.
I don't know, you in the hospital when you gave birth to your 3 kids. Isn't everybody take that first photo?
But you also go into this thing. And by the way, you know, some of this is, and you've just, when you're doing this, the sense of humor, I don't know if you know how funny it is. But it is, I mean, it's laugh out loud. And I mean, the staff at these hotels where we're all just watching, and people like the richest people in the world, like, hey, our room services, we're like, can you relax? We're on episode 3. There's 6 episodes. We have a lot to do. But it's very funny you deliver this stuff. First of all, this idea that really struck me about this whole thing was, number one, she gets together with him. He's like 15, right? So this
it's already weird. It started weird.
It's already like a huge problem.
It's like you're 40 and he's 16. It's like, even if this was above board, he's 14, you're 40, we got a problem.
Huge problem. But then this is what really makes me laugh. It is, and Candace, if you haven't watched this, you gotta watch it because she handles this in a very funny way. It's sold that this is like a voluptuous model that like is on, like no one could resist this woman. Like every guy in class is gonna be looking at this woman going like, this woman is voluptuous and really attractive and like, she's just
Claudia Schiffer. Yeah.
And then the photos come out of Brigitte Macron. And immediately you go, they're lying about everything. Like everything's a lie. Like you see this and immediately you go, wait a minute, hold on. Everything seems to be a lie. We've all seen beautiful women and we know what good looking women look like. There's nothing wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, this isn't a voluptuous French.
This is a gym teacher, a PE teacher.
Yes.
Yeah, they already, when they were trying to run Emmanuel, they knew they had to justify this weird age gap. And so the press went out.
Which again was 48 and 15.
It was, at best, they were trying to tell 40 and 14, okay? At best.
Which is illegal.
But actually,
maybe not there,
it's 48 and 14 because we know
that's the craziest.
Once you get to the end of it, you realize, this is Jean-Michel Trogneau. But if she actually had been Brigitte, the identity that she stole, then it would have been 40 and 14. So they first went to the press and wrote a bunch of confusing articles like, oh, actually, no, he was 15. And they sold him as this like virtuoso Mozart. Right. And she was just supposed to be, according to the press, if you just read the articles and nobody actually found pictures of her, this just irresistible, drop dead Claudia Schiffer, sexy. All the boys, imagine their hormones running, they're horny. Like, oh, we love this teacher. She's so hot. And then you see the actual photos of her.
No, it's crazy.
And you're like, no boy. No boy, not one boy at this school, not even one boy at this school was into this. So what is this? Why did the press even lie to us about that? And then you start realizing something's very wrong here with this picture.
Something's very wrong here. And then you start, and then you do this amazing job of, because there's a lot of people that have looked into this in France, and they've been defamed. and sued.
Detained.
Detained.
The main journalist on this had to move his family because they were trying to get him on taxes. Like, I
Right.
will find any crime. And they started going after people for really small and petty things.
And they didn't care who's writing about this. They are going after everybody. And it's weird for a story with no legs or for something that's completely untrue. Why would they be detaining people?
Why would a president of a country send a letter to Nashville,
to you?
Tennessee?
Yeah, it's crazy.
To like a pregnant woman that's like recording from her basement. That
Right.
tells you the story's true. I mean, there's no
Right.
otherwise you'd be like, well, part of being a president, people write stuff about you all the time. I mean, the stuff they say
Right.
about Trump, like
Yeah.
he's not gonna. You can't chase down every person that's saying something unless there's something here
Right.
that you're very fearful of, and it's terrifying when you get to it.
What do you think the reaction is in, the palace to when this line of inquiry starts coming from you, from someone in America with a massive platform? Are they panicked?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are panicked. They are making phone calls. Their lawyers are still calling my lawyers. They still asked for us to take down the series because they were afraid when Joe Rogan mentioned it recently. So they made another phone call and were basically like, we could still sue you in the future, but maybe you just want to take it down. And I'm like, have they not worked through my character? Stop with these phone calls. I said to my lawyer, if they call again, we're doing a season 2 because I left a lot on the table.
Yeah.
I basically was like,
This
there's
is
so
amazing.
much here.
No, if they call again, you're going to get this on Netflix.
It's right,
If they call
stop
again,
calling
yeah,
pregnant
yeah.
Candace.
No, of course,
Please.
of course. Now, you go through this whole thing. This opens these interesting doors, right? Now, a lot of people, you find yourself in this subterranean world that most people don't know exists, right? Where you have intelligence agencies and these programs, things like MK Ultra. Now, some people do know about this stuff. Some people are, really well educated on this stuff. Some people have a passing familiarity with it. But they were mind control programs that were in America. They were all over the place. And these were programs that were utilized to turn, people into essentially slaves that could be programmed to do things, whether it was assassinate someone and not remember why or who told you to do it.
Right.
Or be a sex slave. Or perhaps in a Manchurian candidate fashion, run the government.
Run a country. And that is who Emmanuel Macron is. And the craziest part
So
is,
that's kind of the, at the end of this, your
by the
belief
time I
when
looked at
yeah.
everything, think about this. This is a guy who was sold to the public as a virtuoso, Mozart. He was just so brilliant. When you get to the episode where I explained to you that essentially, just so Americans understand this, they have a program that every person who runs a bank goes through. Let's call it like a graduate program, like going to maybe UPenn and getting your MBA. It's slightly different, but just for sake of understanding here. So he went to this program after failing to get into it 3 times. Then magically, they're just like, okay, you can get in. And not only did he then get in, but he graduated at the top of his class. There was some like test that they had to do, and he graduated. And everyone on campus knew he was an idiot, okay? For the first time in that college's, university, or program's history, the students revolted and said, these are clearly fake test scores. There's no way this idiot, Emmanuel Macron, got the number 1 grade in this. We all know he's an idiot. And so for the first time in that program's history, because the kids were so outraged, they just canceled results because they made it up that he finished the top of his class. Beyond that, he then goes and works for Rothschild's bank, right? Is the youngest ever managing partner. The people that work at Rothschild's bank said he was such an idiot, he didn't even know what EBITDA meant. But they all knew that David Rothschild just plucked him up, and that was essentially give him a fake
resume. He's never
resume.
defined himself intellectually
Never.
in any capacity.
No, and he was
he's top of his class, and now he's working at Rothschild Bank, the youngest managing whatever.
Yeah, and so that was done by the Wall Street Journal, who did a book on this. So this isn't like we're finding this stuff on Reddit threads. The people spoke out and were like, he was such an idiot, but it didn't matter.
And when
we understood that he was like protected Rothschild, and they needed to kind of create this fake resume for him to make people think he was a genius. He's not. Emmanuel Macron is not smart.
And when the traditional press is looking into this and they're finding similar things to what you're finding, how are they presenting this idea that this kind of like empty suit of a guy is like failing upwards?
Yeah, I think what a lot of these mainstream journalists do is they kind of say what they have to say in a very professional way, and they leave it for the people like me to then kind of,
it's a good point.
Go there and say, hey, guys, this is what a Manchurian candidate would look like.
Right.
These people tend to always be in drama classes.
Right.
It's just like Zelensky is obviously so...
Yeah. Right.
Is anybody actually thinking that Zelensky's running the country? He's a literal
the president
actor
in a
who played a
show. Yeah.
And they all are in these... They're all in drama classes.
I always imagine Vladimir Putin finding that out. And almost being like, what, the CIA is not even trying.
No, I feel that way.
It's not even, it's so crazy.
I do feel that way. I often picture Vladimir Putin.
Khloe Kardashian to run, the Ukraine. Yeah,
and I wouldn't even say, Khloe, I could probably buy more than Zelensky.
For sure.
He's just, it's so odd. It's like, who is behind you? Why are we doing this?
Right.
That was why they freaked out about the Tucker Putin interview, because Putin at one point when Tucker asked a question about, what about the president or whatever, or he said he shook hands with Bill Clinton, agreed to something, and Putin was kind of like, I don't deal with your presidents, I deal with the CIA. Like your presidents are just kind of
they
like
come, they go.
They're puppets. Like I got to deal with the CIA, and these are the sorts of things they don't want the public to know, right? Because we need to all believe in this illusion, like you voted this person in, and this person's really running things, and the deep state doesn't exist. But never, and I've come to terms with that a long time ago, but never in a million years did I think. I mean, the Emmanuel Macron story is wacky because it's like, if you're already going to go through this effort to choose a Manchurian candidate, is it just not like crazy enough just doing that? Like, do you really have to add on the transitioning of a potential family member who molested him when he was a kid and just see if you can get away with it? Is it just like, let's see if the public, if we just have a man as the first lady, that's like a really big.
So who is Brigitte Macron?
Brigitte Macron was an individual who was born Jean-Michel Trogneau.
And the relation to Emmanuel is?
That I can't say for certain.
Okay.
That's why we did not conclude how they are related. My sense is it's the missing uncle whose name is Jean-Michel, who was
not a bad guess.
Who was the godfather when Emmanuel Macron got first communion at school. Who's just missing. Like there's just like a missing. That's my best bet, is that it's an uncle, but I don't know. I know that without question that Brigitte Macron was not born a woman. We've given them every ample opportunity to clarify that fact. And what they've done behind the scenes since that series has only further stressed that we have definitively stumbled upon the truth, and they are going through very desperate measures right now to try to get our series removed off of YouTube.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, as far as you could possibly go in terms of trying to get this series removed and to get me shut up, because they know that the legal route isn't working. They're placing high phone calls. They're doing whatever they can. And that should signal to the public that this is real. Because again, if somebody made a series and was like, no, Candace Owens was actually born Michael, I'd be like, dude, public, you're an idiot. Like, that's actually kind of funny.
There's something interesting about the idea that if you can sell people on this, then what else could you sell people on? If this is the case where this woman who was Jean-Michel Trogneau, they've put the entire French press to sleep. And they've done this with the help of a kind of PR guru in France.
A gangster. Let's be clear.
A gangster.
Mimi Marchand is a gangster.
She's a gangster.
She's, again, now being tried for extortion and all this stuff. But that's the way the governments run. I don't think people can process that, but it's like the CIA was a gang. They are a gang.
Right.
They will kill people who don't do what they want. And so in order to massage this in the public, they used a woman.
People feel very comfortable saying that about Putin in Russia and places, but they find it unbelievable that in America there would be violence
like, no.
or targeted assassinations or blackmail or things like that.
It's weird.